The moment my husband called me useless into a microphone, the room didn't go quiet. It got louder. We were standing in the glass roof reception hall of the Ashford Hotel just after 9:10 p.m. during my sister's wedding dinner. His friends had already been drinking for hours. Finance managers, regional directors, operations heads, people who spoke in quarterly targets and staffing cuts. Someone had handed him the mic as a joke. He put his arm around my shoulders like it was affection. Her, he said, nodding toward me. Useless. Just a housewife. No job. No ambition. But she spends money like she runs a company. Laughter moved table to table. Not explosive. Comfortable. Familiar. I remember the exact sound of cutlery against plates continuing while he spoke, like nothing unusual was happening. One of his colleagues leaned toward another and whispered something while looking directly at me. Both smiled. I didn't react. Not outwardly. I adjusted the bracelet on my wrist and took a sip of water. My hand was steady. Years of boardroom stillness doesn't disappear just because you stop attending publicly. He kept talking. Stories about my failed business attempts. About how he handles the real financial pressure. None of them corrected him. That was the first confirmation. Not the insult, the assumption. They believed him, which meant none of them knew who signed their employment contracts or who approved their executive bonuses 3 quarters in a row. Monday morning was already scheduled. They just didn't know they were on my calendar. I did not leave the reception early. That would have created questions I wasn't ready to answer yet. Instead, I stayed until 11:42 p.m., seated at table 17 beside my aunt and one of my husband's senior operations managers. I remember the time because I checked my phone the moment the speeches ended. Not for messages, for clarity. My husband avoided eye contact after the microphone moment. Not out of guilt, out of dismissal. The way someone assumes the matter is closed because they finished talking. At 10:05 p.m., he leaned toward me and asked if I could grab him another drink. Same tone he used at home. Casual, transactional. I said yes. I brought the drink back. Routine was useful that night. It let me observe without drawing attention. 3 of his colleagues approached him near the bar later. I stayed seated, but watched their reflections in the mirrored column behind them. One of them, Daniel Reeves, Regional Finance, laughed while repeating the word, housewife. I could read lips well enough to catch that. Another asked if he was serious about me not working. My husband nodded. Then he added something that made the others laugh harder. He said, she tried business once. Didn't last. That was the second confirmation. Not just humiliation, narrative control. He had been building an image of me privately long before that microphone ever reached his hand. I left the reception at 12:18 a.m. He stayed behind with his team. The car ride home was quiet. He smelled like whiskey and cologne. He scrolled through his phone most of the way. When we reached the house, he said, don't take the joke personally. They're corporate guys. That's how they talk. I nodded once and went upstairs. I did not argue. I did not defend myself. At 1:07 a.m., I logged into my company email for the first time in 8 months. I still had full executive access. Founder privileges do not expire just because you stop appearing at quarterly meetings. The dashboard loaded slowly. 3,842 unread internal threads. Budget approvals. Hiring escalations. Vendor renegotiations. His name appeared repeatedly. Promotion requests. Compensation adjustments. Department restructuring proposals. All approved. By me. I opened the executive directory. His title sat exactly where I had authorized it, Senior Operations Director. Salary bracket, upper tier. Reporting line, directly under COO. I exported the last 12 months of executive approvals into a private archive folder. Timestamped, unedited. At 1:42 a.m., I accessed HR onboarding records. I searched 5 names from the reception, Daniel Reeves included. Each employment contract carried the same digital signature at the bottom. Mine. I downloaded copies into the same archive. Documentation was not revenge. Documentation was clarity. At 2:10 a.m., I opened internal expense reviews, executive entertainment budgets, client retention dinners, alcohol reimbursements. 3 receipts caught my attention immediately, all submitted under my husband's department. Ashford hotel bookings. Same venue as the wedding reception. 2 were approved under strategic partner engagement. 1 had no partner listed. I flagged the entries but did not act on them yet. At 2:48 a.m., I logged out, not because I was finished, because pacing mattered. Strategic responses fail when driven by emotional timing instead of procedural timing. Sunday remained quiet. He woke at 10:30 a.m., asked if we had leftover cake from the reception, and spent most of the afternoon watching sports. At 2:15 p.m., he joked again, this time privately. Maybe you should get a hobby business again. Keep yourself busy. I smiled faintly and said I'd think about it. That evening, I went into my study and retrieved the physical company formation binder from the locked drawer where it had stayed untouched for years. Articles of incorporation, equity distribution, original funding structure. His name did not appear anywhere. Not in ownership, not in investment, not in advisory roles. He had operational authority only because I placed him there after our second year of marriage, when he said he wanted to build something meaningful together. I scanned 3 key documents: founder share certificate, executive control clause, emergency operational override authority, exercisable without board vote under reputational risk conditions. I saved encrypted copies to the same archive. Monday morning had already been blocked on my calendar long before the wedding. Quarterly executive performance review window, standard procedure, attendance mandatory for all regional directors and senior operations heads, including my husband. At 6:40 a.m. Monday, I woke before him. By 7:05 a.m., I was seated in my home office, dressed in the Navy executive suit I had not worn since stepping back from public leadership. I did not wake him. At 7:32 a.m., I sent 3 internal emails from my founder account. Executive review confirmation notice, mandatory documentation, submission, request, expense audit preclearance, alert, neutral language, procedural tone, no accusations. At 7:58 a.m., my assistant, the only one who still knew I retained active control, replied confirming room booking at headquarters. Glass boardroom 3, 9 a.m. My husband left the house at 8:10 a.m. without realizing I had already been working for over an hour. He said he had a long Monday ahead. I agreed. At 8:47 a.m., I entered the headquarters building through the private executive entrance. Security still recognized my clearance badge. No one from his team saw me arrive. Inside boardroom 3, I placed 6 folders neatly along the conference table. Employment contracts, expense records, approval chains, promotion justifications, performance metrics, and 1 sealed envelope marked founder authorization, pending. I sat at the head chair, not as his wife, as the person who built the company they believed he financially carried. At 8:59 a.m., voices gathered outside the glass wall. His voice among them, confident, relaxed, unaware. The meeting invite had not listed the presiding executive. That was intentional. The door handle turned at exactly 9 a.m., and that was when the first real shift in power entered the room. The door opened slowly, like any other executive review morning. No urgency, no hesitation. My husband walked in first mid-sentence, speaking to Daniel Reeves behind him about staffing allocations. He stopped after 2 steps. Not dramatically, just enough for the sentence to die unfinished. Daniel entered beside him, then 2 regional managers, then HR compliance. 6 people total. All of them had laughed 2 nights earlier. No one sat down immediately. Their eyes moved from the folders to the chair, to me. My husband recovered first. He gave a short laugh, the kind people use when they think something is a misunderstanding. "You didn't tell me you were coming in today," he said. His tone wasn't hostile. It was corrective, like I had entered the wrong room. "I scheduled the review," I replied. No one spoke after that. HR compliance, Ms. Turner, opened her tablet, and glanced between us. She knew who I was. She had been present when founder authority clauses were signed years ago. My husband noticed her reaction. He looked back at me, slower this time. "This is symbolic attendance," he asked. "No," I said. "Operational." Silence again. Thicker now. They sat down gradually, chairs sliding against the floor, louder than necessary. I began at 9:02 a.m. Quarterly executive review. Standard procedure. Documentation requested Friday evening. I slid the first folder across the table toward Daniel Reeves. He opened it confidently. That confidence lasted 3 seconds. Inside were his employment onboarding records, contract, compensation structure, executive benefits authorization. My signature on every approval line. He flipped the pages, once, then again, slower. He did not look at me. I moved the second folder to Regional Manager Collins. Same structure, same signature. By the third folder, no one was flipping pages casually anymore. They were reading, carefully. My husband hadn't opened his yet. He was watching the others first. Pattern recognition beginning. At 9:11 a.m., Daniel spoke. "I wasn't aware you were still involved operationally." "I never left operational authority," I said. He didn't respond. He just nodded slowly and continued reading. That was the first shift. Not apology. Alignment recalibration. I opened the performance review dashboard on the screen. Behind me, department efficiency metrics appeared, color-coded, time-stamped. My absence from public leadership did not suspend oversight. I said, "Executive conduct remains under founder review." My husband leaned back in his chair. "You're auditing my team?" he asked. "I'm reviewing executive conduct," I said. His jaw tightened slightly, not anger yet, discomfort. I clicked to the next screen. Expense approvals. 3 Ashford Hotel bookings highlighted. Dates. Amounts. Authorization chains. Daniel looked up first this time. "These were client engagements," he said. "One lists no client." I replied. He checked the page again. Silence. I did not accuse. I did not interpret. I only read what was documented. At 9:19 a.m., I opened my husband's folder. He did not touch it when I slid it toward him. I left it closed. Instead, I projected his promotion file onto the screen. Timeline: 4 promotions in 6 years. Salary increases. Executive privileges. All approved through founder authority override. He stared at the screen longer than necessary. "You approve these?" he asked. "Yes." No elaboration. No tone shift. He nodded slowly, recalculating public posture. Because now the others were watching him differently. Not socially, structurally. At 9:27 a.m., HR compliance spoke. For procedural clarity, founder authority supersedes board delegation in conduct reviews. It was a neutral statement, but it formalized the room's power structure in real time. My husband looked at her, then back at me. "So what is this about?" he asked. Still controlled, still professional. I folded my hands on the table. "Executive representation accuracy," I said. He frowned slightly. "Clarify." I opened the final document set. Not expense records, not contracts, internal leadership communications, email threads where he described financial burdens he personally carried, statements about supporting non-working dependents, jokes made in management channels about single income pressure. Time-stamped, archived, unedited. No one spoke while the emails displayed on the screen. Not because they were shocking, because they were familiar. They had believed them. Daniel leaned back, slowly processing. Collins avoided eye contact with my husband entirely now. This was viral lock number 1. No speech required. No accusation spoken. Just documented reality colliding with social narrative. My husband cleared his throat. Those were internal morale conversations. He said, I nodded once. Understood. I did not argue intent. I only moved to the final slide. Founder ownership structure. Equity distribution chart. My name holding controlling share. Board voting weight. Executive override clause. No one had seen this chart before except legal and compliance. The room recalibrated again, visibly this time. Daniel closed his folder fully. Collins sat upright. HR compliance typed notes. My husband did not move. At 9:41 a.m., I spoke again. This review is procedural. Documentation will be submitted to executive governance. Neutral, measured, final. No confrontation. No emotional reference to the wedding. But the connection was understood by everyone present. My husband finally opened his folder then. He read silently for nearly 2 minutes. When he looked up, he did not look at me first. He looked at the others, because their perception now mattered more than mine. Authority betrayal had reversed direction. At 9:48 a.m., he asked one final question. Is this disciplinary? I held his gaze evenly. That depends on documentation consistency. I said, no threat, no promise, just process. The meeting adjourned at 9:52 a.m. No one spoke to him on the way out. Alignment had shifted quietly, exactly where it needed to. And this was only the documented surface. The tone inside our house changed before any official outcome did. Not openly, subtly. He came home earlier that evening, 6:12 p.m., earlier than usual for a Monday. He placed his keys on the kitchen counter instead of the entry tray, something he only did when distracted. I was preparing dinner. Nothing unusual. Same routine as any other weeknight. He watched me for a moment before speaking. You could have warned me, he said, not accusatory, controlled, about the review. I followed executive procedure. I replied. He pulled out a chair and sat down slowly. You made me look blindsided in front of my own team. I placed 2 plates on the table. It was a compliance review. He didn't respond to that. Instead, he asked, how long were you planning that? I didn't answer directly. Documentation was requested Friday. I said. He nodded once, unsatisfied but recalibrating. Dinner passed with minimal conversation. Not tense, procedural. Like 2 professionals navigating shared space after a disagreement, neither wanted to escalate publicly. At 8:05 p.m., he went into his home office and closed the door. That was new. Historically, he kept work separation strict at home. But that night, emails began moving quickly across executive channels. I could see the activity through my founder dashboard. He was contacting his department heads one by one. Subject lines, clarification, review context, temporary alignment. At 8:42 p.m., he sent a department-wide message reframing the morning review as routine founder re-engagement. He minimized its significance. That was his first boundary crossing, not private reputation management, but narrative repositioning inside corporate structure. At 9:10 p.m., Daniel replied asking if expense documentation needed resubmission. My husband responded, copying 2 others. No concern. Founder optics review only. Financial conduct remains under operational leadership. He had reasserted authority in writing. I archived the thread, not because it was damning, because it contradicted documented compliance language issued that morning. Self-incrimination. Step 1 had begun. Tuesday morning, I arrived at headquarters again. Unannounced, not for confrontation, for observation. At 9:23 a.m., I entered the open executive workspace from the mezzanine level overlooking operations. My husband was leading a stand-up meeting. His tone was confident, louder than usual. No structural changes. Everything continues as is. He told them. Several team members glanced toward the mezzanine when they noticed me standing there. He didn't look up immediately. When he did, he paused mid-sentence for half a second, then resumed speaking without acknowledging me. Boundary crossing continued. He was publicly maintaining authority posture while founder oversight remained active. I took notes. At 10:05 a.m., HR compliance emailed requesting resubmission of entertainment expense justifications from his department. Standard procedure after flagged entries. He replied within 6 minutes. Previously approved under founder authority. No resubmission required. He had now contradicted process directly. Self-incrimination step 2. I did not intervene. Procedural escalation works best when allowed to mature through documented resistance. By Wednesday afternoon, the communication tone inside his department had shifted further. Managers were asking him privately if the founder review would impact bonuses. He reassured them repeatedly. In writing, I have operational autonomy. I handle executive approvals. Founder presence is ceremonial at this stage. Each message strengthened the evidentiary trail, not through lies, but through overconfidence. At home that night, he approached the subject again. People are asking questions, he said while standing in the doorway of my study. Reviews generate questions. I replied, You're not planning restructuring, are you? I'm reviewing executive conduct. He studied my face, searching for emotional signals he could interpret. I gave him none. Silence creates more pressure than accusation. He shifted tactics. You could have spoken to me privately first. I closed the file I was reading. This is private, I said. He frowned slightly, not at the words, but at the implication that corporate process outranked marital hierarchy. That was the boundary he was struggling with. Thursday morning, governance compliance escalated the flagged expenses to formal review. Policy required departmental explanation within 48 hours. He submitted documentation at 3:18 p.m. I reviewed the file at 4:02 p.m. 3 justifications, all retroactively written. 2 listed unnamed clients. 1 listed a partner company that had not conducted business with us in over a year. He had created narrative alignment after the fact. Self-incrimination step 3 was forming, not through falsification, but through procedural inconsistency. That evening, he sent another internal reassurance email. All founder queries resolved. No departmental risk. He CC'd senior leadership. That message contradicted active compliance investigation already in motion. I archived it beside the others. At 7:40 p.m., he attempted a softer approach at home. You're not trying to embarrass me, right? I looked up from the dining table. This isn't personal, I said. He nodded slowly, but the tension in his shoulders suggested he didn't fully believe that. Friday at 11:15 a.m., Governance Compliance scheduled a formal expense review hearing for the following week. Mandatory attendance. Departmental representation required. He received the notice while leading another operations call. I saw the read receipt timestamp on my dashboard. 4 minutes later, he emailed his team again. Routine audit. No concern. He had now committed publicly to a narrative that documentation would soon contradict. Viral lock number 2 had completed its first 2 structural loops. Public authority assertion. Written contradiction of process. The third, institutional response, was already scheduled. He still believed this was perception management. He didn't yet understand it had moved into procedural territory. And once documentation enters governance channels, outcomes no longer depend on tone or confidence. They depend on record, alignment. Governance Compliance scheduled the hearing for Tuesday, 10 a.m., Boardroom 5. Unlike the earlier executive review, this meeting did not come from my office. It came through the automated compliance chain. System generated, policy triggered. That distinction mattered. He received the formal notice Friday afternoon at 2:06 p.m. I saw the confirmation through the governance dashboard. Mandatory attendance. Documentation verification required. Financial conduct alignment review. He didn't come home early that day. When he did arrive, just past 8:30 p.m., he went straight into his office without speaking. I could hear low phone conversations through the door. Names mentioned. Legal. Finance. Audit. Still controlled, though still convinced this was containable. Saturday morning, he approached me in the kitchen. This hearing, you initiated it? He asked. No, I said. Compliance escalation. He studied my face, looking for confirmation of intent. Then you can close it, he said. I don't close governance procedures. I replied. That was the first moment his composure fractured slightly. Not anger, discomfort turning into uncertainty. He nodded once and left the room. Monday, 9:12 a.m., he sent one final reassurance email to his department. All documentation aligned. Hearing procedural only. No structural impact expected. He copied 3 senior managers. I archived it immediately. Self-incrimination, loop complete. Public assertion, written contradiction. Institutional review pending. Tuesday morning, I arrived at headquarters at 9:35 a.m. and entered boardroom 5 through the executive corridor. Governance hearings follow strict seating protocol. Compliance at the head. Legal to the right. Departmental representation opposite. Founder authority seated in observational capacity unless intervention required. I chose not to intervene. He entered at 9:58 a.m. carrying a leather document portfolio. He looked surprised to see me present, though my attendance rights were standard. He sat across from compliance. At 10:02 a.m., the hearing began. Ms. Patel from Governance Compliance opened the file. Review concerns 3 hospitality expense authorizations dated Q2 and Q3. She said, neutral tone, procedural pace. She projected the receipts onto the screen. Amounts, venues, approval signatures. Then she displayed his submitted justifications. He spoke confidently. Client engagement events, strategic retention discussions. Please identify clients present. Ms. Patel said. He named 2 companies. Legal cross-checked. Neither had scheduled meetings on the listed dates. He adjusted slightly in his chair. Informal discussions. He clarified. Attendance records? She asked. He paused. No written attendance logs were maintained. Compliance shifted to the 3rd receipt, the one listing a dormant partner company. Engagement with a non-active partner requires pre-clearance, she said. It was exploratory, he replied. Exploratory meetings require proposal documentation. He had none. I did not speak. I did not need to. Documentation was doing the speaking. At 10:21 a.m., compliance moved to authorization hierarchy. These expenses were approved under founder authority, she said. He nodded. Yes. She turned to me. Can you confirm approval context? I answered simply. Operational delegation, not discretionary social spend. She nodded and entered the clarification into record. That was the procedural fracture point, because now approval context and expenditure use no longer aligned. At 10:33 a.m., compliance displayed internal emails, the ones where he reassured staff no audit risk existed. Time-stamped, distributed company-wide. He shifted posture visibly then. These were morale assurances, he said. While compliance review was active, Ms. Patel replied, yes. She entered that statement into the record as well. Legal requested clarification on operational autonomy claims he had written. Do you hold executive approval authority independent of founder review? He hesitated half a second too long. Operationally, yes, he said. Legal turned to governance records. Founder override remains active in all financial conduct reviews. Counsel replied. Contradiction entered record. Self-incrimination. Step 3 finalized. No confrontation required. Just documentation layered against public claims. The hearing adjourned at 11:12 a.m. No disciplinary outcome issued yet. Governance reviews require deliberation windows. He exited the room without speaking to me, but he also didn't make eye contact with compliance on the way out. That silence said more than any defense could have. By Thursday afternoon, administrative restrictions were placed on his departmental expense authorizations pending review outcome. Temporary, procedural, but visible. Managers noticed immediately. Approval delays began stacking in his queue. Client dinners paused. Travel requests rerouted. He attempted to override 2 restrictions. System denied both automatically. Those attempts entered governance logs. He stopped trying after the second denial. At home, conversation reduced to logistics only. No mention of the hearing. No reference to the wedding. Just operational silence between 2 people now functioning on parallel professional tracks. Friday, for 18 p.m., governance issued preliminary findings. Policy breach, misaligned expense representation, authority mischaracterization, documented, operational narrative misrepresentation. Documented. Final outcome pending board ratification. He received the notice before I did. Departmental subject of review always receives first delivery. He came home early that evening. Not angry. Quiet. He stood in the doorway of the living room and said only one thing. I didn't think it would escalate like this. I looked up from my laptop. Documentation escalates itself. I said, no emotion, no satisfaction, just process reaching its natural endpoint. The collapse didn't arrive through a single decision. It unfolded administratively. The first sign was scheduling. Monday morning, 8:03 a.m., 3 of his recurring executive meetings were reassigned to interim oversight, not canceled, just redistributed pending governance outcome. Language matters in corporate restructuring. Nothing sounded punitive, but everything signaled distance. He noticed immediately. At breakfast, he scrolled through his calendar longer than usual before leaving for work. No comment, no question, just a slower buttoning of his cufflinks before walking out. By midweek, email routing protocols shifted. Expense approvals that once moved through his authorization queue were automatically forwarded to the COO's office. He attempted to reroute one manually. Compliance reverted it within minutes. System enforcement, not personal correction. That distinction kept confrontation unnecessary. Wednesday afternoon, Daniel Reeves requested clarification on departmental entertainment budgets. Instead of messaging my husband directly, he copied governance compliance, subtle realignment, loyalty following structure rather than personality. My husband responded professionally, but the tone had changed. Shorter sentences, no informal commentary, no reassurances. Documentation had narrowed his language. By Thursday, 2 client retention dinners were postponed. 1 vendor contract renewal stalled due to delayed expense authorization clearance. The vendor contacted procurement, not him. Operational bypass had begun. He noticed that too. He came home that evening later than usual, 8:47 p.m., and ate dinner standing at the kitchen counter instead of sitting down. No discussion about work, no complaints, just silence accompanied by procedural fatigue. Friday morning, governance issued interim administrative adjustments. Temporary suspension of discretionary expense approval authority. Mandatory financial conduct retraining. Executive representation review pending board conclusion. He received the notice at 9:12 a.m. I saw the system alert simultaneously through founder oversight access. He didn't call me, didn't message, didn't confront. At 11:40 a.m., he canceled his afternoon leadership roundtable. At 2:05 p.m., he declined a speaking invitation at an industry operations conference, an event he had previously confirmed months earlier. No explanation listed. Externally, the company released neutral messaging about internal compliance recalibration. No names, no incidents, just standard governance language. But internally, alignment had already shifted. Managers routed decisions upward. Compliance monitored his communications. Procurement required dual sign-off on vendor engagements he initiated. Nothing loud, nothing humiliating, just structural narrowing of influence. At home, routines changed in quieter ways. He stopped discussing departmental wins over dinner, stopped referencing staffing decisions. Even his phone calls moved outdoors, taken on the patio instead of inside the house. Professional identity recalibrating under observation. Saturday afternoon, I noticed him reviewing old performance presentations on his laptop at the dining table. Past metrics, past growth graphs. Not for work, for reassurance. He closed the laptop when I entered the room. Not defensive, just private. Sunday evening, governance issued another update. Board ratification scheduled for Wednesday. Final outcome to be delivered same day. He received the notice at 6:18 p.m. We were both in the living room when the email arrived. His phone buzzed once on the coffee table. He read the message without picking it up fully, just leaning forward. He didn't speak for nearly 2 minutes afterward. Then he stood and went upstairs. No door slam, no raised voice, just withdrawal. Monday and Tuesday passed under administrative quiet. He still went to work, still attended required meetings. But influence had shifted visibly. Colleagues deferred to interim oversight. Compliance attended his departmental briefings. Notes were taken where none had been before. Wednesday morning, board ratification occurred at 10 a.m. I attended remotely, observer status only. Deliberation lasted 43 minutes. No dramatic statements, just policy references, governance language, documented contradictions. Final outcome issued at 10:47 a.m. Formal written reprimand. Permanent removal of discretionary expense approval authority. Probationary executive conduct monitoring, 12 months. Mandatory external compliance certification. No termination. No demotion. But structural trust reduction codified in record. He received the outcome at 10:51 a.m. I saw the confirmation timestamp. He came home early that day, 4:06 p.m. He didn't remove his jacket immediately, just sat in the living room chair, near the window, still holding his work bag. I didn't ask about the decision. He didn't volunteer it. At 5:12 p.m., he spoke without looking at me. They've restricted my approvals. I nodded once. Silence again. No defense. No accusation. Because the collapse hadn't come from confrontation. It had come from documentation, procedure, and his own written assurances colliding with governance record. Later that evening, he deleted several framed company award photos from his home office wall. Not destroyed, just stored in a drawer. Professional identity adjusting to structural consequence. No speeches followed. No emotional resolution conversation occurred. Just administrative fallout settling into daily routine. And in the absence of confrontation, the quiet carried more weight than any argument could have.